Okay, so this is intermediate ministerial internship, L Ministry 291. So the first lesson that I covered with my mentor, Pastor Roger Pleasantberry, was about preaching. His main tips were find Jesus in the Old Testament. So an example of that would be with the Israelite exodus of Egypt, the Passover lamb, and how Jesus is now our Passover lamb. He also recommended having a good understanding of some of the messianic scriptures that are found in the Old Testament. Um, for example, Psalm 22, or some of the things out of Isaiah that point to the Messiah. Um, and his final, I think, and most important tip to me was be the same person behind the pulpit that as you are at home. So if you're preaching against certain types of sin behind the pulpit, you better not be committing those sins at home. So that way, somebody asks your kid's wife if that's how they is that how he acts at home, and that should line up with what you're saying behind the pulpit. So moving on, number two, and this is definitely one of the more sticky situations that I think any pastor will face, and this was his advisement on dealing with conflict management. Disagreements, listen for his main premise was listen for how many times they say I feel. Then ask them to give a scriptural reason for why they feel that way. Because because we shouldn't run the church based off of somebody's opinion, so to speak, but we should base it off of what the Bible says, and we should run the church biblically. So if you have a situation that is bad and it's hard to handle, and as long as it's not a privacy thing, so there's a marriage falling apart or some other crimes that you cannot bring out to other people, the first thing you should do is go to the person. That's what the Bible instructs us to do, is that we go confront the other person about whatever the situation is, and if it resolves, then great. Then it's water under the bridge. Cannot be resolved, then you go to the elders and you let the elders try to handle that disagreement, and then you bring it before the church if it's not resolved there, and then finally, and this is the last step in what we all try to avoid in expelling the members. I think the examples that he gave was people were preaching bad doctrine. It may have been like a oneness doctrine or something along the lines of that, or or preaching against tongues as the mark of the baptism of the Spirit. Things that disagree with the fundamental truths that we have laid out with the assemblies of God. Effective leadership. Uh, you should place leadership by witnessing a person's life and character, someone's testimony. He said that he gave me an example one time where he had an open uh, an open spot on his board of elders or trustees, and a lot of people were clamoring about who should get this spot and trying to jockey for position. And so he stood up for the church one Sunday and said, "Okay, I mean, all of everybody stand up," and then he started narrowing down by first by saying, "Hey, if you're saved, if you're not saved, then you need to sit down." Probably a pretty good step, and then he'd go on to the next one saying, "Hey, if you hadn't been baptized, by water, sit down." And then he said, "If you hadn't been baptized by the Spirit, then sit down." And finally, he got it down to a few people, and then they finally chose somebody. So people that have the life and character and the tools that you need to lead a Christian life. There's somebody's testimony. You probably don't want somebody on your board of elders that are going out to the bars every night. Providing biblical tools, and you need to set the example for the people. And his two biggest tips were in this area is that the first 3 to 5 years you are pastoring another man's church. Uh, People are going to come to you and tell you that, yeah, well, the last pastor did it this way, and or you don't like the last pastor, and you should just respond affectionately and just ask that they pray for you to help become the shepherd that they need. Just show some humility about it. And he said that trust is built but not earned. So it takes time to build that trust. You don't earn it in a day. You can lose it in a day, but it's not earned in just a single day. And then finally, we touched on evangelism in our fourth meeting. We discussed sharing the gospel, ways to share the gospel. He gave me a good book to read called Evangelism Explosion. And he said to use questions and then describe how you were before and how you are now. And then when Jesus bought you, he bought you your whole testimony, so the good and the bad. And we talked a little bit about his life before coming to Christ. He was a sinner and an alcoholic who wound up being washed by the Lamb, the blood of the Lamb, and Jesus turned his life around. And he tells people, "Hey, I was this way before, and then when I met Christ, I was this way after." So this is the intermediate mentorship, and this is my presentation for it.